Hey, it's Doug. Welcome into the CCM Cafe, sitting opposite Matt Hammitt. Matt, thanks for taking time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We don't have any Kleenex on the table, but that was definitely something that I needed when I watched Bowen's Heart, which is one of the things we're going to talk about, this new documentary about your son. Before we get there, though, let's back it up to the very beginning. You guys chose, you and your wife Sarah, chose to do a blog based on this diagnosis. Break that down for us, the diagnosis, and then why a blog?
Yeah, so in 2010, we were diagnosed, well, Bowen, our son, was diagnosed in Sarah's belly still. She was still pregnant at the time, with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which for short we say HLHS. And you know, when we found out what that was, we had no idea what life would look like, and spent those first, I guess from April to September, those few months really going to different specialists and just finding out that we had to go through 3 open heart surgeries after he was born if he survived. And so that was obviously hard news for us to take in, and because Bowen, she was still pregnant, it was like we couldn't do anything. There was nothing we could really do that felt proactive as parents to help, except for pray and trust. And that's kind of how the blog started. Just me really not knowing what else to do besides try to gather an army of prayer warriors of sorts, right? Mm-hmm. And just invite people into that story with us to be able to pray for us as we were awaiting him being born. And we actually named him Bowen because it meant small victorious one. And he had a little heart, but we knew that his story would be victorious. It was God's story, it wasn't ours. And so we held on to that, we believed it. We know that God is good whether he gives or takes. And so we tried to be hopeful that God would allow us to keep Bowen, but we also tried to prepare ourselves for whatever it was that God would do with his life. So it's a very tough time for us as parents.
I can't even imagine, and certainly thank you so much for being so transparent through the blog and then now with this documentary, because I firmly believe God puts us through things not only for us, but that we could help shine a light a little bit to everyone else. What did it mean, as I understand 6 million people connected with that blog over there? What did that mean to see that show of support?
Yeah, well, so many radio stations shared his story, and it just was such a blessing to us to see God's family come around us. And at the time, I wasn't even looking at the numbers. It was later that somebody asked me, how many people have visited the blog? And I went and clicked a button, and I was like, wow, that many people cared enough to come around us and pray and follow his story. And so it was a big deal for us, and that meant a lot.
So Bowen's Heart is a new documentary that is out and about. My wife and I had a chance to see it this weekend, and the Kleenex comment. What led to wanting to do that, and how soon did you know you were wanting to make a documentary about the journey? Yeah,
so because we got so much, attention around the story in 2010, that continued to grow. And people started seeing us as a family they knew had been through the situation with heart disease. And so not only did people who had heard our story contact us when they started their own journey, maybe a diagnosis of heart disease with a child, but they were also telling their friends if they had anyone in their family or friends who also had a child who was diagnosed with heart disease. They'd say, hey, we heard about Bowen's story. You should really get in touch with them. And so we had an overwhelming amount of people over the years reach out to us. And we did start a small foundation where we were able to have some donations to help other people. But you can only do so much. And what we noticed over the years is that the biggest questions we received were questions about how it was going to affect people's lives. So people wanted to know, please just tell me how this is going to affect my marriage, my family, and how's it going to affect the other siblings once we have this child and we're in the hospital? What do we expect when we go to the hospital? And how did you guys make it through this? And also they wanted to know that they're not alone walking through it. So when we were coming up on Bowen's 3rd open heart surgery, we kind of thought, how can we use this situation that we're about to walk through to help people like the ones who've reached out to us over the years? And it just really felt like God was prompting us to share that story in an even more real way with people. And so we decided that we really both felt that we were supposed to make a film through that experience so that we could show people who are asking those questions and who would continue to be asking those questions for years to come as more kids are diagnosed, exactly what to expect and exactly what they're going to go through. So there's an advocacy piece to it, right? To raise awareness for heart disease, congenital heart disease in particular. And there's also a hope that families who see it know they're not alone. Not just families who are going through, heart disease, but families who struggle with any kind of chronic illness or hard issues or challenges in their lives and marriages. And to show people how, over the years, God's grace has helped us use these situations, or how He's turned these situations into redemption, and that there's hope in the midst of so many families that are broken apart by these kinds of struggles. Up to 70 to 80%, according to some studies, of families and marriages break apart and go through divorce because of chronic illness or losing a child. So we wanted to show how a family with God's grace could actually be made stronger through a situation instead of being torn apart. And so that's how we ended up making Bowen's Heart. A really cool piece of it was that my wife called a friend named Lexi Reed, who worked for NBC. She was a documentarian, her and her husband, Zach. They made short docs for NBC Online and the Today Show, and shared the idea with her and invited her into the process. And at the very time we wanted to make this documentary, but didn't have a huge budget that it would take to make the kind of film they made, they were looking for a chance to kind of get out of the network and move into feature-length documentary work. So it really worked out. The timing just couldn't have been better. And so they did a beautiful job with the film.
Yeah, well, and again, thank you. So transparent, and so much is shared on there. Talk a little bit about the impact then of what Bowen is going through as it relates to your other kids, because I think a lot of families can relate to that one. There's this situation, but then you love all your kids.
Yeah. In the film, there's a moment where our daughter Claire says to Sarah, it's like Bowen does something and you're like, it's okay, buddy. And then we do something and you're like, it's like there's kind of that whole feeling of delicacy around, how do we handle the empathy piece for the child who needs it when they need it, right? And so we worked really hard to give our other kids a voice, to be able to share safely without any defense from us or any offense from us, to be able to say when they need more from us, or if they feel that they're being overlooked. We allow them to speak very openly about what they're feeling about the whole situation, and do our very best to kind of pivot as parents to giving each child what they need as they need it. And so it's, we don't always do it right. Obviously, no parent does.
Right.
But, we've learned to be really attentive to those needs and try to be really patient with those needs.
In terms of sharing feelings, I know as a guy, a lot of times it's hard to do that, right?
Yeah.
We're supposed to fix it. We're supposed to do that.
Yep.
It was interesting to see sort of your journey as a part in the film when you're looking back on these photos of the past and you're like, I don't want to go there. Yeah. I'm guarding my heart. During that, you're doing Sanctus Real and all this. Yeah. Have you gotten better or easier in terms of processing through that?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just writing about this yesterday because I just finished a book for an organization called Save the Storks. That's going to be a free resource to pregnancy centers across the country. It's going to be a fatherhood program for dads who find themselves in unplanned pregnancies. And a big part of my challenge in that book is this very thing, is being willing to take a look under the hood, per se, of what's really happening in our hearts and minds as men, because it's easier, like you said, to kind of just want to keep moving, want to keep going, just plowing through life, driving along, keep things coasting, everything's steady. It's sometimes it really takes a big breakdown for us to look under the hood and see what's happening. But I've learned, I think, along the way to be willing to invite, especially, I've gotten better too with Sarah, but also invite other men into my life who, along the way, on a regular basis, we have these maintenance kind of conversations where we talk about what's happening inside of our hearts and minds. And I think that's been one of the most powerful pieces of the intentional way that I've tried to live my life over the past few years, which is creating time and space for community with other men in my life. And with our family, with other families as well.
Sure.
But to be able to slow down and invite not only other guys into my life to hear what's happening so that I can stay accountable to where I'm at, but also give them a voice too. So I've grown tremendously through this process.
That's good. No,
Yeah.
that's great, and I love the encouragement because I definitely can resonate with that. There's so much that we as men can be lacking on because we feel we have this burden to carry. So the idea of inviting other people in. Talk about the transition when you made the decision to step down from Sanctus Real. Along those same lines of the guy is plugging along. Wait a minute, I'm 2 decades in. This is my boy. What do I? But you stepped down.
Yeah, it was a hard decision to make. I had been with Chris and Mark, who are still with Sanctus Real, with their new singer Dustin, and I'd been with them for 20. By the time it was 20 years that we'd been a band, and so we were best friends since high school. And so that decision, I didn't take it lightly, and of course they didn't take it lightly. It was hard. It was complex, and our lives were so intertwined with each other. So it was a hard decision, but really, the craziest part, I think, to me, when it comes to like the musical side of it, was the song "Lead Me," and it was such a pivotal song in my life. "Lead Me" was actually #1 on Christian radio when Bowen had his first open heart surgery 5 days after he was born, and then it went on to be a song that I had written about being a more present husband and father. But the success of that song took me away from home even more. And then as I'm on the road, we're out with Casting Crowns and Winter Jam and all these huge tours singing in front of sometimes 10 to 20,000 people. They weren't always there to hear us or just us, but they all knew the song "Lead Me." So there were moments in the middle of "Lead Me" during the prayer portion of that song where I'd hold the mic up and I'd hear, 10,000 voices singing every word back to me. And it was preaching back to me about whether or not I was actually living the words to that song. That was pivotal for me. And feeling, every person who sang that song back to me in a crowd at a concert has no idea they were like a part of that story of bringing me to a point where I knew that I needed to like sing it less and live it a lot more. And that was really kind of what was pressing on me to the point where I decided it was time for me to actually go home and live it and be there and be more present with my wife and kids.
So you got to be careful about what you write because it's going to come back.
Yeah, exactly. It was definitely more a song for me, or as much of a song for me as for anybody else.
What is your hope or the takeaway from folks that see Bowen's Heart? What conversations would you anticipate people having afterwards?
Yeah, I definitely want people to feel that we share the struggles that they share. Of course, we don't know the exact pain they feel. Like they don't know the exact pain we feel, but we have a sense that in our unique pain, collectively, we understand what it is to feel hardship and feel struggle. And when we know other people are feeling some of the same things as us, then we can kind of get a sense that we can make it too if they've made it, right? So I hope that people see that we're not glossing anything over in the film, as you know. And I hope they get that sense of, okay, we're not the only ones, and we can do this because they made it. So, Romans 5, my wife and I always go back to the words of Paul when he says that, suffering produces perseverance and character produces hope. Our perseverance produces hope, and hope does not disappoint us. God's hope never disappoints us. And so I also hope that people see our faith reflected in the film, and that our hope is in Christ, and that he took something that was broken, that doctors said would break our family, which was Bowen's heart, and he used it to make our family more whole. And only God can do that. So I hope people feel the power of that when they watch it.
Definitely. My wife has aversions to grief, so I know one of the things when I talked about asking her to watch this movie with me, I had to say, and Bowen's okay. Like, Bowen's still alive. She goes, okay, I think I can watch this. I feel like the hard question would be, if things had gone differently,
Yeah.
would there still be a movie?
I don't know. That's a really good question that we asked ourselves many, many times. And we talked about it with our producers, Zach and Lexi. We kind of felt like we would have to make that call as things happened, but we definitely had that meeting a time or two. And so I don't know, but boy, the knowing that that could have been an outcome really helps us, I think, just cherish each day we have even more, so we're grateful. Makes us more grateful.